Oh, Patrick Howley has done a piece for the Daily Caller with all this talk about stand your ground laws and all these statistics that are thrown out there, which misrepresent what actually the case is. It's like saying, the New York City Fire Department graduating class had only, 3% African Americans in it. Well, what percent of applicants were African Americans? They never give you the full information. Well, Patrick has done a study and done the statistics and has found that blacks benefit from the Florida Stand Your Ground law at a disproportionate rate. And joining us now is Patrick Howley, who wrote the piece in the Daily Caller. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Okay, again, with the understanding, I guess, that a lot of people have seemed to miss that there was never a stand your ground hearing in this case. Although stand your ground was read to the jury, but it boiled down to a self-defense defense for George Zimmerman. Nonetheless, the Attorney General and others have been attacking stand your ground laws with reference to this case. But let's talk about stand your ground laws. Let's talk about Florida specifically, this horribly racist law that they tell us about. And you tell me what you found.
Yeah, well, what I found is that the black population in Florida is 16.6%, but 33% of a full one-third of the cases where a defendant has claimed stand your ground have been black defendants. And they've used this defense successfully 55% of the time, which is, the exact same as all people who have used stand your ground and actually higher than white defendants. So it appears based on the statistics, and nobody will actually, publish these statistics and say black versus white versus Hispanic, which every now and then, if you look at it objectively, is an important thing to do when you're talking about race. But this is just taking away one more opportunity for black people to defend themselves in their own communities.
All right, so let me give you the numbers that you gave to all of us through your piece at the Daily Caller. 44 African Americans in the state of Florida claimed, I'm trying to guess this is from, 133 people in the state of Florida have used stand your ground defense. That's total? That's ever?
Yes.
Okay, so 133 people used stand your ground. Of these, 73 were considered justified. That's 55%. 39 resulted in criminal convictions, and 21 are still pending. 44 African Americans in the state of Florida have claimed a stand your ground defense. Of these claims, 24 were considered justified, which is 55%, while 11 resulted in convictions and 9 cases are still pending. And of the 76 white people, 40% were considered justified, which is less than 53%. So a greater percentage of blacks in Florida who have claimed stand your ground based on the cases that have been adjudicated fully, a greater percentage, really about the same, but technically a greater percentage of blacks have won their cases through stand your ground than whites have.
Absolutely. And, there was an example in the story about a father and a son who were delivering newspapers together at 3 in the morning, and they were approached by someone who was obviously on drugs, which happens a lot. I live in a neighborhood, too, in the city where if you're outside at 3 in the morning, you're going to run into somebody who's a drug addict. They shot the drug addict, and it turns out that the drug addict didn't have a gun on him, but he was reaching for something that looked like a gun. And the black father and son, who were just out doing their job, making a living, were able to use stand your ground in order to get off. This has helped black people on a number of occasions in Florida and all around the country.
Well, I would love. Did you have a chance to interview the father and the son at all?
I haven't. No, they've been pretty private. But there are numerous cases of this happening, and a defense lawyer down in Florida was saying he represents a lot of kids who have gotten messed up with gangs, and he says stand your ground is a good thing for black people. This is a good thing that lawyers can use.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I heard the most ludicrous thing, and I wish you had heard it because you might have included it in your piece. Piers Morgan, a couple nights ago, talking to somebody, talking about how, get this now, gang leaders all over the country are using stand your ground as a defense when they shoot people. Now, gang leaders. First of all, if a gang leader gets caught, they got him on so many. They chase gang leaders. I mean, I can't think of or haven't heard of one quote unquote gang leader in this country who shot another gang member or whatever and says it was stand your ground. I think he's making that up out of whole cloth.
Yeah. Yeah, no, stand your ground is very specific. I mean, in order for the court to even allow that argument to be read, it has to really just be a fair confrontation that happens when the person isn't expecting it. They're confronted by someone who's on drugs, or they're confronted by someone. But the thing is, when you live in an inner city where there's a lot of compression, those kinds of confrontations happen all the time. And it's not anyone's fault necessarily. It's just people are very compressed in predominantly black neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods as well, to a slightly lesser degree. And so these kinds of confrontations are going to happen. And so something like Stand Your Ground is in place to protect all people if they have those kinds of confrontations in the early morning hours.
You got to do another study for us, Patrick. We're talking to Patrick Howley, investigative reporter for the Daily Caller. You got to find out either in the state of Florida or specifically in Sanford what the crime rate is. And what percentage of whites commit crimes, what percentage of blacks commit crimes, what percentage of Hispanics commit crimes, and how disproportionate it is according to their own populations. I'd love to know that because all we hear about was how vicious and racist George Zimmerman must have been to have called 311 on a young man with a hoodie just because he was black doesn't mean he should be a suspect of any kind. And of course, he didn't call and say there's this black kid. He was asked what race he was, and I think he would have called no matter what the race. But it'd be interesting to have the statistics to say, well, you can't blame George Zimmerman for thinking that. Here's why, if in fact the statistics bear him out. But you do point out one last point here, that the best-known African-American associated with Florida's Stand Your Ground law is Marissa Alexander. And she was just in the news. She was just sentenced to 20 years in prison for firing a warning shot at her husband who had been, beaten her in the past, and she was not allowed to use Stand Your Ground. She's in jail, explained that she was in jail for 20 years, and guess who put this African-American woman who was trying to protect herself from a beating from her husband in jail for 20 years? Yes, you got it. The hero of the Trayvon Martin supporters, or the anti-George Zimmerman people, however you want to put it, Angela Corey.
Yeah, the state attorney who lost the Zimmerman case was the one who put the black woman, Marissa Alexander, no criminal record, beautiful, young woman who was trying to defend herself from an abusive ex-husband. She shot a warning shot. She didn't even kill him, but she's in for 20 years for unlawful discharge of a firearm. So you see how the activists in the media only focus on certain cases and not others. And if it's that random and it's that scattershot, then there's something really wrong here. And instead of talking about inner city violence, and instead of talking about schools that are so decrepit that kids are dropping out when they're 13 and 14 years old and joining gangs, we just have to play these little games and focus on George Zimmerman versus Trayvon Martin, because that's easy for the media to put out there and for people to sort of understand on a simple us versus them level.
Yep.
But they don't want to talk about the problem at large.
And I blame the so-called civil rights leaders, Jackson, Sharpton. I guess, Alveda King came on here and said that the NAACP, this is what she said, the NAACP is race baiting by calling for civil rights charges, and she wondered aloud who's writing checks in the background to the NAACP. So, it might be a money game. Who the heck knows? But there's really no money to be made if they just look at the real problems in those communities. I thank you very much, Patrick Howley. And if you do a study on the statistics of the racial breakdown of crimes in that area or in the state, I'd love to have you back.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thank you. That's Patrick Howley, investigative reporter for the Daily